Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Future Seeds podcast. I'm your host, Cyprian, and in this show, I explore groundbreaking solutions to our world's unique problems by connecting seemingly unrelated fields such as technology, ecology, community, and spirituality. In this episode, I interviewed Dorset Campbell-Ross. Dorset is a counselor certified in nonviolent communication. He's also an NLP master practitioner and hypnotherapist, codependency lecturer, seminar leader, and mediator. In episode 19, we explored the 4 steps of NVC, namely observation, feelings, needs, and requests. Episode 20 is more of a role play in which Dorset shows us with examples the way he would approach difficult conversations in different contexts, in a workplace, in a relationship, and with a friend. He also gives valuable tips on written communication, emails, and text messages, and sends a beautiful message to the world at the end of the interview, embedded with a deep desire for peace. Dear listeners, it's not always easy to get clear on what we can actually do to help this world, how we can impact. This is why I've created a cheat sheet, your 10 superpowers to change the world right now. You can download it on www.futureseeds.news/superpowers. Let's say I'm a dissatisfied employee and I need to raise an issue with my boss. So I'm the employee here, you're the boss, and for example, I don't like the way you speak to me on a daily basis. How would I address that with you?
Okay, you don't like the way I speak to you on a daily basis. So, first of all, I would empathize with you because I hear you're not happy. The first thing that goes through my mind is, are you happy or not? No, you're not happy. You're unhappy. There's something bothering you. So I would empathize with that. And empathize is part of validation. Validation is like saying, I hear you. I really get you. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, I'm hearing that sometimes I say things you don't enjoy. And I'm guessing that must be upsetting for you. And you're really wanting are you wanting some change here? Something different? Do you want to tell me more about it?
That's on the part of the employer. How would the employee bring it up?
As the employee would say specifically what it is. So the more specific and exact we can make this observation, the more likely I, the employer, am going to be able to go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. So if you said to me, yesterday, when I brought in those files that you asked me to find for you, and I put them on your desk, and I said, here are the files you asked me to find for you, you said nothing. You said, oh no, I remember what you said. You said, put them over there. And, I went away feeling like I didn't exist. Now, that's not pure MVC. I could have said, I felt like I was invisible. That's not pure MVC either. But, that might get it across to the other person, what the kind of feeling you're having. But to be more specific, to say, I felt small. I felt hurt. I felt sad. I felt disappointed. Because I really want to connect with you. I really want to know that you appreciate me. And actually, this is my need for appreciation and to be seen and to be heard. So I was wondering, next time you ask me to do a job and I deliver it, would you be willing to acknowledge me? Because I really love acknowledgement. And would you acknowledge the job I've done? Now, I know that sounds a bit sort of like classical because it's not the way we normally talk.
Amazing, really, that type of talk would happen in companies. It's pretty far from that.
Well, I teach companies, and the whole thing is that, first of all, when you sell your time to a company, then let's suppose you're my employer. I come to you. What am I doing? You're my boss, and I'm selling you my time. That's what all employees are doing, aren't they? So I sell you my time, and what do I get paid for? Well, I get paid for doing what you asked me to do. And once I've made this deal that you're going to pay me for what you asked me to do, I don't expect you to ask me, you know, with a request, would you be willing to get me a cup of coffee? No, of course not. You're just going to say, Dorset, would you get me a cup of coffee? Because I'm your employee. We've already made that deal. So it's not like I expect you to give me choice with every request or every, you know, they are actually demands, but they aren't, because they're requests, because you have a choice. You don't have to work there. You don't have to accept their money. So you don't have to do what they tell you to do. You have the choice to use your feet and walk out if you want. But once you've chosen to take the job, then you don't have that choice if you want to keep getting paid. So the bits that we work on in businesses is the observation. You know, it's very important for people to be on the same page, to connect about what is happening without evaluation. Because if, you know, things get confusing when we listen to evaluations and we think that's a fact. It's not, right. It's an opinion. So let's just listen to the facts. Let's boil it down to the facts, and we can all agree on the facts, and we can leave the evaluations out of it. And that's going to help us connect.
Let's continue this little role play exercise. I'll give you maybe another 2 situations. Very different. So that was more a work environment. Let's try a relationship now. Let's say I'm an angry wife. I've been for 20 years with my husband. I don't like what he's becoming. He's absent, he's not caring, he has addictions. How would I bring it up with him?
First of all, I want to say what I saw that I didn't enjoy, or what I heard that I didn't enjoy. So it's going to be one of those 2 things, isn't it? When I remember when you came home last night, and I said to you, "Hi, darling," and you grunted. you made a noise. I won't say grunted because that's a bit of an evaluation. I'll say you made a noise that I didn't understand what you were saying. And then you went and poured yourself a drink, and you went and turned on the television, and you sat in front of the television. When I saw you do that, that's all observation, I felt sad and disappointed. Now, this is classical MVC, and I'm saying it this way so that all your listeners and people who watch this can understand the steps that I'm going through. Because if I don't do it this way, you won't know what I'm doing. So, first of all, my observation is you came in, you went da-da-da-da, you ended up with the TV, and then I feel disappointed. I feel sad. Next step is the need. What do I need? Well, I would really love to connect with you a little bit when you come home from work. I would love to, I'd love to have a hug, you know, or just to say, how was your day? And, you know, swap a little bit about how your day was and how my day was. I really long for that. So I was wondering, in future, would you be willing to come and talk to me before you get a drink and go to the TV? And you put it that way that they can say yes or no. Not like, oh, they can only say yes, because if they say no, you're going to get all upset and you're going to say, well, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. No. It's got to be a real request. So it's like, would you be willing to come and see me first? And that gives that person the option to say yes or no, totally. And so they can say, yes, I'd love to do that. You know, I'm so glad you asked. Or they can say, no, darling, you know what? I am so tense and overwhelmed when I come home. I just need some time to myself before I come and see you. So that's why I have a drink and thing. You know, I'm just making up an answer, but I'm trying to show you how a request has to encompass the possibility of a yes or a no. And if it's a no, then what do? We empathize with the no. Because we know when the person says no to one thing, they're saying yes to another. So what is it they're saying yes to? Oh, I see, darling. So you really want to just have some space to yourself and zone out with your drink and the TV before you come and talk to me. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I really need. Okay, so would you be willing to come and see me, say, after 15 or 20 minutes? Would that work for you? Because it would work for me. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Ah, wonderful, great. So we've come to a solution that works for you and for me. And that's what MVC is all about. It's how do we... Mediation is always about how does everybody get their needs met so we end up in a win-win situation. There's no compromise required if your needs are met and my needs are met. Differences and conflicts happen when we get stuck on one strategy. You know, one of the things in relationships, of course, very, very big, is that, you know, we all have a need for love. We all know that. We all have a need for touch. We all have a need, most of us have a need for sexual expression. And yet we have these awful, painful relationships sometimes because those needs aren't met. And why? Because we've pinned all those needs onto one person instead of realizing their universal needs. What do I mean by that? I mean, if I need you, Cyprian, to love me, that's not a universal need, because the whole world doesn't need you, Cyprian, to love them. That's not universal, okay? Yeah. So you don't have to love everyone. We all have a need for love. That's a universal need. But where does it come from? That's not universal. So if I can't get it here, I need to look over there. If this person says, no, I don't love you, to keep knocking on that door is to keep creating misery. Because the door's closed. You're banging your head on the door and wondering why it hurts. We have to get the message that, oh dear, the love from that person is not available. But guess what? There's still, 9 billion more people to choose from, so maybe I can find somebody else who will love me.
And on this topic, it gets even more complex, as I think there's a book called The 7 Languages of Love. Whereas depending on cultures and education, we have all these different ways to give and expect
absolutely
love in return.
And the definitions of love. Do you have the same definition as me? I think it's a really great idea to talk about this when we get together with somebody and we say, I love you. Well, what I want to say is, well, what do you mean by that? What does I love you, Dorset mean? And I've been amazed at the replies I've got. Yeah.
I'll try that.
Yeah, it's a really great idea because actually, it turns out people, for one person, it might be something like, I love you means, I'm really happy when I'm with you. And some people might even say, you make me happy, because that's our conditioning, isn't it? To be codependent.
And some people will say, we can have a dog
and
together.
Other people will say, what I love you means is that if we ever have a rupture, if we ever have a conflict, if we ever go into fear, I'm committing to work through it and return to love. I'm committing to repairing the rupture.
That's very different.
That's what I love you means. Wow, what a different definition. And how good, because, that person who has that definition is realistic. They know that the bliss of falling in love is not going to stay forever, because actually people are drawn together to heal themselves, to heal each other, to heal their childhood wounds, to heal their trauma. And that's why we get attracted to each other. It's actually because there's something about you that fits perfectly for me. And what is it that fits? It's that you feel familiar. And what does familiar mean? It means family are familiar. So you remind me of something that I experienced in my family. Maybe it was the love I experienced in my family, or maybe it was the conflict I experienced in my family. Maybe you do something or say something in a certain way which is just exactly like a person who hurt me when I was a kid. And that wound has been in me all this time. and it's never, ever been sorted. It's never been sorted out. It's never been released. So an example is, for me, I had a pretty traumatic childhood. I had an alcoholic stepfather who beat up me and my mother and drank a lot. And also my mother was extremely codependent, so that meant that she thought she could change him. If she just loved him enough, he would stop drinking. And of course he never did. So it was a pretty tragic relationship, because she was in love with somebody who wasn't really in love with her, because he was in love with a bottle. And so, naturally, lots of needs went unmet for my mum and for me. Now, I grew up very angry at my stepfather for being such a drunk, for hurting me, for hurting my mum, and on and on. 40 years of therapy later, and meeting Marshall Rosenberg actually was the cure, the final cure for resolving the differences with my dad. Because I did a role play with Marshall where he played the part of my dad and my stepfather. And, we had this conversation where I actually, for the first time, really appreciated my stepfather as a human being who was just like me, who made mistakes, who wasn't perfect. Because that's the human condition. We're perfectly imperfect. We all make mistakes, and that's how we learn. We all suffer. We all have pain, and that's how we learn. If we get clear observations from other people about what we did that sabotaged us getting our needs met and maybe stopped others from getting their needs met, we have to ask ourselves, is this really what we want? No, it's not. So I need to know how to change. I need to know what to change, and that's why your observation is so important to me. To be specific, to say, actually, it's this one little thing that you do that I don't like. Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I wanted to come back on. The way you expressed how the wife would bring it up with the husband before. One thing it reminded me is focus on the future. It avoids blame. And I think that's something we're not aware of, because we usually come in a situation and we talk about the past or the present, and it's not constructive.
Well,
And the way you put it is, would you be willing in the future to...
exactly, because we can't change what's already happened. Exactly. If you came home, got drunk, watched TV, and I'm your wife, yeah, I'm sad, I'm disappointed. We can't change that. That's already happened, hasn't it? But what we can change is maybe we can stop this from happening again in the future if I address it, if I talk about it, and if I express my needs, and if I can show, I didn't get to the drink part. I think that somebody who's drinking addictively, or, somebody who's drinking every day as an alcoholic, or smoking pot every day, whatever it is, we're using a substance to medicate our feelings. All therapists and counselors know this. That when we stop eating food just for nutrition and we start eating for comfort, we're medicating ourselves. And we medicate ourselves with marijuana. We medicate ourselves with alcohol. We medicate ourselves with tranquilizers. We medicate ourselves with heroin. This is medicine. That's why, actually, I believe that all crimes related to marijuana, alcohol, all these things, they should be treated by doctors and hospitals. It's not about prisons. Somebody who's using a medicine to medicate themselves doesn't need a prison. They need a doctor. And so...
That's what they've done in
Portugal, exactly.
In Portugal
yes.
now.
So they decriminalized it and made it an illness rather than a crime. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Because, so the wife would say, so, darling, I'm noticing that you're drinking more than you were a year ago, and I'm worried. I'm worried because I care about your health. I'm wondering, how do you feel when I tell you that? Because it's a very delicate thing we're talking about, and it's quite easily to be taken the wrong way as a criticism rather than somebody trying to help you. Good idea to check in at that very point about how it's landing. How is that request land? How is that statement you've just made, the observation, you're drinking more. The feeling, I'm worried. And the need, I care about your health. So, how does that land? It's a great idea to stop there and find out how the other person's hearing you, because maybe they're not hearing you the way you want to be heard. In which case, good idea to clean it up at this point.
Verify. I've only have two more questions to ask you, and in order to segue into the real question I want to ask, I want to add a little example, a little role play. Let's say I have a good friend, and my friend is buying products that support animal cruelty, lots of plastic packaging, high volume of polluting hobbies, and maybe works for a corporation that has a toxic impact on the world,
Anything like that.
Difference in belief systems, etc. How would I approach my friend?
Well, expressing yourself honestly. Once again, if we were to do this classical MVC thing of identifying the 4 steps, which is what I teach to beginners, it would be, when I see that, all those things you just said, that you make your company makes tons and tons of plastic that you throw away, or uses plastic that ends up in the ocean, killing ocean life, or I feel, how do I feel? How do you feel? How do you feel when you see that stuff? Sad? Disappointed? And why? What's the need that's unmet for you? Is it something like care for the planet, care for the future, care for the children who are to come, and their children, the next generation? That's how I talk about global warming. I feel very strongly about reversing global warming. I'm a big fan of David Attenborough in his latest movie. If you haven't seen it, folks, make sure you see it. Yeah, you've got to see that movie. So I feel sad because I watched this movie the other day, and it told me that if we don't do anything in 100 years, this planet is going to be dust. It's going to be one big desert. And when I imagine that, and I imagine my grandchildren having children and them having children, and this is the planet they're going to inherit, I'm devastated. And I don't think the answer is for us all to move to Mars, I think, I want to believe, that this is reversible. So I was wondering if you might consider, having a look at that movie and seeing how you feel after you watched it, and then maybe you might want to make some changes in your lifestyle. I know you're going to have to be persuaded first that it's worth doing, and that climate change is not a hoax, and all this sort of thing. So, it takes a little bit of research. Would you be willing to do some research?
Very softly, getting some information, some resources to him.
We all need, we need to be convinced if we're going to change. We have to be convinced that the change is worth it, don't we? Whatever that change is going to be. True. So, I might think, I could do with a better cleaner in my swimming pool, but I'm not just going to go out and buy one without doing a bit of research first and find out which is the cleaner that works the best, which is the one that other people like, what do my friends use, this sort of thing. So I think that's how we make decisions in life. That's how we choose between A and B.
The reason why I was getting to that is the current state of the world, the current environment. I can't tell if really communication has reached a worse level than many years ago, but it's pretty bad. Everything is just so extremely polarizing at the moment, and there's so much misinformation, and people seem to not be able to communicate at all. It's 100% fights, whether online or offline. Can't talk about COVID, can't talk about ecological issues, can't talk about civil rights, can't talk about Black Lives Matter, can't talk, everything is a conflict. How can NVC help us in this social web?
Wow. You see, if we use MVC, we start off with those steps I told you about. The very first one is your observation, and we want to stick to the facts that we can both agree on. So let's start with some facts we can both agree on. Now, if we're talking about difference of opinion about Trump or something, getting facts that we can both agree on might be difficult, because one or other of us is going to be saying, that's fake news. In which case, you've got little or no chance of resolving your differences if you don't have any facts that you can agree on to start with. So therefore, it's probably not worth going there. Which might be why some people say, don't talk about politics or religion at dinner or when you eat, because it'll spoil your
health
digestion. Digestion. Yeah. Health, again, health, yes. It's easy to get into unknowns about health. If you're talking about vaccination, I'm guessing that's what you're referring to. Because, again...
Yeah, well, everything about COVID is so conflictual.
About COVID, for sure. But, put COVID aside for a minute, there is some pretty good information that we're all on board about, what it takes to make a healthy life. Fresh air, exercise, calming your nervous system with meditation or whatever, therapy. All these things pretty universally agreed that, we are happier when we're calm. When we're agitated, we're not. We're not going to be so happy. We're not going to be so likely to be in love if we're scared, if we're agitated, if we're afraid, if we're angry. And so maybe one of those big questions that I love so much is, if I want to decide, do I want to go down this road or not? It's, will it bring me peace? So is it going to bring me peace right now to discuss vaccinations with you? No, I don't think so. Why? Because actually, we don't have any facts we can start with. I know that you're afraid that everybody's going to be vaccinated with a chip that will track us and make us into cyber people. But I don't believe that, because I haven't seen a vaccination pill that does that. I haven't actually heard of anybody rolling out vaccinations to populations of people. I don't even know if a vaccination even exists. Just saying, I'm playing the devil's advocate here. You're coming with your fears about this vaccination that I don't think even exists. So how can we possibly resolve this dispute unless you can prove to me, here's the vaccination, Dorset, look, and I took it apart and it's got these chips in and then I'm going to go, oh, wow, yeah, thanks for teaching me, I really learned something new and important here. But until that happens, I'm telling myself, it's a what if. And, if I want to get afraid of what ifs, my goodness, what if the bomb drops tomorrow? What if a meteorite crashes onto the planet? What if? I can go what if till the cows come home, and I found that doesn't bring me peace. So I don't do what ifs.
Same as climate change. So actually, I was listening to this cool webinar from the 2040 movement, and this scientist goes to the outback to talk to the farmers there who are in complete drought and still don't believe in climate change. And she meets 20, 30 of them, and she said over the years she's developed this strategy because, they go directly into conflict. So now what she does is she goes there and she doesn't talk. She only listens. And people talk for a long time. And she listens for maybe an hour of people saying climate change isn't real. When they're finished talking is when she starts talking. And she said it works much better because by that time, even though I haven't said a word, we've created a connection. And now we're kind of friends. And even though we don't agree, I'm allowed to speak out about climate change.
Yeah. That sounds good. Connection's good. Empathy before education is another one of those phrases that I always bear in mind when I'm talking to people. if somebody's upset and they are, even if they're upset about the weather or vaccinations or climate change, and they're spouting out a lot of stuff, and maybe I spot that they are actually contradicting themselves, or that they're telling something that's proven to be not true, and yet they believe it is. Rather than saying, wait a minute, that's not true, wait a minute, you're contradicting yourself, empathize first. So empathize means put yourself in their shoes, feel what it's like to walk in their shoes, and walk beside them in their pain, because they're hurting. So let's first of all acknowledge the pain and hear the pain. And as you said, you're making a connection there with that person. So and here's a farmer talking about his drought, how awful it is. Well, let's really hear how awful it is, and really let's connect on that level before we start saying, "Oh, that's because of climate change, isn't it?" Because that's the education that, when somebody's upset, they can't even hear education. We're in a part of our brain that shuts down the logical side. You ever come to somebody who's upset and who's really frustrated or crying or something, and give them a list of figures and say, "Oh, could you add this up?" They're going to throw it out the window because they're so upset. And when they're emotional, they can't do logical adding up of figures. It's just a different bit of the brain that's not available right then.
Absolutely. I got only one question left for you. I was wondering if you'd have some good tips on written communication.
Oh.
So as we know, we write a lot of emails, a lot of text messages, and there's a lot of information that's lost and creates conflict much easier.
Yes. Oh, yes, I can give you some really good advice on that one. First of all, don't press send. Don't press send. Write to your heart's content, but don't press send until you've read it again and again and again, and this is obviously in a conflict situation, to remove all the attacks, make wrongs, blame, evaluations, and get down to solid facts that you believe you can both agree on about what happened specifically, and your feelings, your needs, and your request said in a way that's not making the other person wrong. So, to be honest, sometimes we can't do this for ourselves because we can't be objective. So we need somebody else to look at it first. Have a friend, especially if they do MVC, have a friend look at it and say, "Hey, do you see any blame or make wrongs in my letter here?" If it's an email, that's very important. I found one time I was so upset with somebody, I had to rewrite my email 5 times before I got all the blame and attack out of it. And I thought, honestly, in my innocence, I thought that all blame and attack was removed. And when I showed it to my friend, they said, "You must be joking." They saw so much make wrong and attack in it, So we're quite good at deluding ourselves, I think.
I find text messages can really be much different from a phone call, and I've even had girlfriends where I'm like, "No, we can't, no text messaging. You leave a voice message or you call me."
I think that if it's an emotional thing, then it's time to pick up the phone and talk to each other. Text messages are good for saying, "I'm going to be 15 minutes late" or something, or "Let's meet at 10:30 on Thursday at the swimming pool," or whatever it is. That's great.
Factual.
For that. Yeah, factual stuff. Yeah. But when I'm feeling hurt and I really need to talk to you and connect, definitely not text messages. Nah. I need to hear your voice and I need to hear your tone, and ideally I want to see you face to face.
Absolutely, totally agree. So we're getting to the end of this interview, and there's one last thing I asked each one of my speakers, which is if you could send a message, address yourself directly to the listeners for a minute, tell them something about communication, something that touches you, reaches you, that you'd like the whole world to hear.
Well, If we want peace in the world, we have to create a world where everybody's needs are met. There is enough. There's enough food. There's enough for everyone if we share it, if we don't hoard it, if we're not too greedy. So the dream of MVC is a world where people's needs are met, where our basic human needs are met. And if we keep this needs consciousness alive within us, not only of our own needs, which is very important to be aware of your own needs, by the way, and the needs of others, then and we go out in life with that as our intention, that everybody should get their needs met, we will create paradise on earth, I believe. That's me.
Beautiful. It's been an amazing conversation, Dorset. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I'm regretting a little bit that I didn't quite finish some of the stuff I started, because I remember I was working through expressing myself, connecting with myself, and I never actually did receiving the other, using the 4 ingredients.
So what we can do is send the listeners to your website.
You can learn a bit from my website, which is mvcworks.com, but even better, find yourself an MVC training and get along to a foundation training. I'm one of 700 certified trainers around the world, and there's lots of us, and I'm doing trainings in this area. I'm doing in the middle of a training right now in Mullumbimby. It's sold out, and public training, and we have 5 more planned for next year. So if you want to get in touch with me personally, I can let you know. I'll put you on the mailing list.
You've heard Dorset. If you need consulting, if you need mediating, if you need training, head to nvcworks.com and find what suits you. Thank you so much, Dorset. It was really a great chat.
You're very welcome, and I hope it's been useful, and I hope it's helpful to people.
The Future Seeds podcast is a project that is supported by its community of listeners. If you like the show and what it stands for, I invite you to head to www.futureseeds.news, where you can support the show for just $2 a month, be part of the Future Seeds community, connect with its amazing members and speakers, and enable this podcast to thrive. I thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the show and its exploration of alternative solutions to the world's greatest challenges.